This Nugum, the Breslov Hasidim have received from generation to generation from Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, and Rabbi Nachman is said to have received this from his uncle, Rabbi Baruch, who would have received it from Baal Shem Tov himself. And this melody is sung on Shavuos according to the tradition of the Breslov Hasidim. Rabbi Nachman himself, when he was just about 27 years old, and he was on his beginning stage of his pilgrimage to the land of Israel, he was in a boat already in the harbor in Odessa, waiting to set sail for the Holy Land, for Istanbul first of all, and then on to Israel. And it was then the night of Shavuot, and he said to his attendant in the boat there, "Well, can't you hear the music of the giving of the Torah? Can't you hear the celestial music?" Sinai, Mount Sinai, where the children of Israel arrived on this day, the first day of Sivan, just weeks after their exodus from Egypt. Sinai is in a desert. Sinai is in no man's land. Nobody can say, well, it's my land where the Torah came into the world. Sinai is not the highest mountain in the world. On the contrary, Sinai is a very humble mountain where God chose to descend and reveal himself to Israel. And all of our ancestors were there. Deep in our souls, the ancestors that are deep in our souls were all standing there. And the experience was so riveting and so unforgettable, so imprinted deep in them that they simply ever afterwards adhered to the Torah that they received at that time. And every day, when we start our day, we again express our gratitude for the privilege of having received God's wisdom in the Torah. After a Jew rises from his bed at night and begins to get up and wake up, he's washed his hands, he's cleansed himself, the first thing he gives is the blessing over the Torah. Blessed are you who have chosen us from all the nations and given us your Torah. Torah, the life eternal within us, within our grasp. What a privilege. And particularly on the festival of Shavuot, after we have counted day by day, and today we stand on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, on the 45th day of the Omer count, 45 days after we started the count, the night after the first day of Pesach. And today, for me, is a particularly significant day, as it is the day of the passing of my late grandmother, Marat Rachel Bat Ezriel. And I offer this teaching today, Le'ilui Nishmata, today, the first day of the month of Sivan, the day where, as we learn in book of Exodus, chapter 18, Vayichan ha'am b'tachtis ha'har, the people encamped all as one, all in unity at the foot of the mount of humility, the foot of lowliness, the foot of willing, of a nation of emancipated slaves, willing to accept wholeheartedly whatever. Na'aseh v'nishma. We're not going to dictate. Whatever you say, we'll do it. And hopefully we will hear and understand afterwards. Na'aseh, we shall do, v'nishma, and we will understand, we'll hear, we will, because how could you possibly first understand before you do it? This is the divine wisdom, the divine light shining into the world for all of the generations that came into the world to Israel on that day, which we go over again year by year on the festival of Shavuot. And there are many, many precious practices on the festival. It's customary on the night of Shavuot this year, on Thursday night, to wait until the stars come out to complete the full 49 days of the Omer count, so that Shavuot comes on the 50th night. It's only after nightfall on Thursday night that we make our Kiddush. And many, many people strive to keep awake all of the night of Shavuot, or at least for as many hours as possible. Some follow the Tikkun Lil Shavuot, which collects passages from across the 5 books of Moses, the prophets and the holy writings, the Mishnah and passages from the Talmud and the Zohar and other writings. Other people have the practice of having joint shiurim classes and gatherings to keep together, to be awake, and many try to pray at the crack of dawn on the morning of Shavuot, this coming Friday. The services of Shavuot morning are lengthy with so many parts. The full festival morning prayers with the added psalms, the blessings of the Shema, and the morning service Amidah prayer, followed by the Hallel. And then, before we come to the reading of the Torah, we first read the book of Ruth, the scroll of Ruth, Megillat Ruth, which is appropriate because Shavuot is the day of the birth and of the ascent on high of Ruth's illustrious great-grandson, David HaMelech, our awaited ancestor of our awaited Moshiach, who the David come back to redeem Israel. And Ruth, his humble great-grandmother, the model of humility, was the true Gioret, who accepted with her full heart the Torah of Israel and came to a strange country, a strange nation, a strange culture, and accepted all of the rules and was worthy of being great-grandmother to such a soul. And on Shavuot, we are all Gerim. The assembly at Sinai was an assembly of Israel who are all at that moment converts. Our sages taught that we all underwent the circumcision, the males, and all of us underwent the immersion in the mikveh prior to this experience. And then, as in temple times, there were the sacrifices of the Gerim that were offered, and all Israel must have the humility to understand that the Torah does not belong to us as something that we can consider our private possession. The Torah is given to us, vested in our keeping, to be a shining example to the nations. Well, the Torah reading on Shavuot morning after reading the book of Ruth is introduced in the Ashkenazi communities with prior to the actual reading from the Torah scroll, the reading of a very lengthy, most beautiful liturgical prayer for those who are familiar with the Aramaic language, and it's also available in the English translation, the prayer of Akdamut Milin, a very lengthy prayer about the uniqueness of Israel and the greatness of the Torah and Israel's defiant stance against the nations who want to wean her from the Torah. And then comes, after the chanting of Akdamut in the synagogue, which is adorned with flowers and greenery, signifying the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai that broke out there in the desert with grass and verdure. So there, after the reading of the scroll of the Torah, after the chanting of Akdamut, we then come, the Torah reading itself is from Exodus, the account of the Ma'amad Sinai, the assembly at Sinai, God's appointing Israel as the Am Segula, Mamlechet Kohanim, the treasured nation, the nation of priests. And then comes, fittingly, the Haftarah from Ezekiel, the first chapter, Ezekiel's vision of the Merkavah. The Merkavah, the workings of divine providence, which is there presented in the image, as it were, of a chariot drawn by these chayot with their many faces, the faces of a lion and an ox and an eagle and a man, and their corresponding wheels, the spirit driving the wheels, very, very mysterious and appropriate for the first day of Shavuot. And then comes the Shavuot Musaf, additional prayer, signifying the sacrifices brought in the temple on this day. Many extra sacrifices, including the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves of leavened bread that were presented at the altar by the priests, not burned on the altar, because it was forbidden to burn any leaven on the altar, but the 2 loaves were presented at the altar and distributed for eating by the priests in the temple courtyard, with numerous animals that were offered on the altar on that occasion. Well, after this very lengthy service, people then go for a festive meal, and the first part of this meal would be a milk meal with milk and cheese products, signifying the chesed, the kindness of the giving of the Torah, signified by milk, which is the nourishment of little children and the little infants of many of the animals. And it is customary, therefore, to have a meal of milk, and then to remind ourselves of the laws of the Torah of separating eating milk and meat together. We say our grace after the milk meal, and after a decent interval, some may want to have a bit of a sleep if they've been awake all night. Then it is customary to, for those who eat meat, to have a festive meat meal. And all of these are the outer observances of Shavuot. But in order to evoke the significance of the Torah for all of us, I would like us to study today from the writings of Rabbi Schneier Zalman, the founder of the Chabad dynasty of Rebbes, of leaders, coming from the tradition of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and the work of Rabbi Schneier Zalman, the Tanya, was one of the very first of the Hasidic writings in the tradition of Baal Shem Tov, and presents the practical implications of the Hasidic path of Baal Shem Tov in a rationalistic and analytic manner. And the work that we are studying from today is well known as the Tanya, and we're going to study today chapter 46 of the Tanya, which deals with the bringing into our awareness the significance of the receiving of the Torah at Sinai. And before we actually start with the section from the Tanya, let us take a look at a verse in the book of Proverbs, which will form the basis of the very, very beautiful image which the Baal HaTanya, Rabbi Schneier Zalman, will give to us. And this is to be found in Proverbs chapter 27, where the verse states, Kamayim haponim laponim, kein lev ha'odam la'odam. Just like in the case of water, when you're face to face, if you put your face over a stream or a still pool, kein lev ha'odam la'odam, so is the heart of one person to another person. That is to say that two people, when one radiates a particular face or mood to his or her fellow, that is going to elicit a corresponding face or mood from the other. Just like in the case of water, or in the case in our time of a mirror, when you put your face in front of the mirror, you're going to see your face there. Similarly, the face you show to the other will be received by them in a way that will elicit a reaction corresponding to your face. Kamayim haponim laponim, kein lev ha'odam la'odam. And with that, let us go now to the teaching of Rabbi Schneier Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad dynasty of Rebbes and teachers, in his work, the Tanya, the first section of the Tanya, chapter 46, Mem Vov. And there we learn, in the context of his teaching us of many, many different pathways in the service of God, there is a straight, direct path before everybody that is equal for every soul. And it's very, very close indeed for everybody to actually fulfill in order to arouse and to radiate the light of the love that is actually fixed, even though deeply hidden in one's heart. It is there. And here we're going to be taught the way to bring out our love for God, in order that the light of our love for God will shine forth with strength, like fire in a revealed manner in one's heart and in one's mind. The love for God, to the extent one is willing to hand over oneself, to surrender oneself to God, one's soul and one's very body and all of one's might and power, with all of one's heart and all of one's soul, with all of one's strength, from the very depths of the heart in very truth. Now, this would be particularly the case at the time of the reciting of the Shema, morning and evening, the Shema and its blessings, as will presently be explained. And here the significance of particularly this kavanah of reciting, as we're going to be hearing about it in its details at the time of the recital of the Shema is because the recital of the Shema, morning and night, is our time for strengthening our love and our awe and reverence for God. It is really our prime time. We cannot be connected, most people, all day in love and fear of God. We are dealing with our mundane business, and it's particularly at the time of Shema and the time of prayer. And the time of Shema is indeed a daily time for the receiving of the Torah. These words that I command you today shall be upon your heart. That's the first verse of the Shema after the declaration of faith. These words shall be on your heart every day. That is to say, every day there is a new receiving of the Torah. And in the blessings we recite in the morning prior to the Shema and the full Siddur. The first blessing depicts the majesty of God with the ministering angels at his service. And the second blessing in the morning is a lengthy blessing, also lengthier than other blessings, expressing our chosen role as recipients of God's Torah and the awesome privilege and our understanding of God's love for us. So the recital of Shema, which is our daily receiving of the Torah, is preceded in the morning by these two blessings, the majesty of God and our favorite place in creation, and likewise in the evening, the first blessing before the evening Shema depicts God's majesty in the workings of the cosmic clock of day and night, night and day, light and darkness, followed by a shorter blessing again about our favored role as receiving the Torah and our commitment to studying the Torah constantly. And so it's in that context that we begin now this work where we're being taught how to find a way that everybody can fulfill to serve God with all our hearts and souls. And if a person will take heed to the verse that we just looked at in the Proverbs in chapter 27, verse 20, the verse says, just like in the case of water, the face reflects the face, so the heart of one person will be reflected in the way the other person responds. And now explains about Tanya, just like according to the appearance and the form of the face that a person shows to the water, the pool of still water, so there will appear to him that very same form and face in the water. Exactly. And so too is the heart of a person. When one person is faithful in his love to somebody else, then that love that the first person has to the second itself arouses a corresponding love in the heart of the second person, their friend, back to the first person. It's a mirror process, and thus they become faithful lovers one to the other. And particularly this is the case when a person sees how their friend loves them. Well, now this is the very nature that is imprinted in the character of all people. And this is the case even if the two of them are equal in their status. How much more so will be the case if a very great and mighty king shows his great strong love to a particular commoner, a lowly individual, a person that people would even despise, that is somewhat solid and that is even in the very scrap heap. And the king comes down to that person from the place of his glory with all of his ministers all together, and he lifts up and elevates that individual from the scrap heap, and he brings him into his palace, the palace of the king. He brings him inside into the first chamber, and then inside to an inner chamber, from chamber to chamber, to a place where not even the king's servants or even the leading minister of the kings would be able to enter. And there, the king, in privacy with this individual, shows him tremendous love and affection, hugging that individual, kissing the individual, to the point that there is a joining of spirit with all of their heart and all of the soul. So now, says the Baal HaTanya, up till now, we've had the mashal that started off with the verse from Proverbs, one face radiating to the other, and then we had that this would apply in the case of not only two friends of equal status, but even with a great king reaching down to a commoner, showing the commoner such great love. So now we're going to see the nimshal of in this case, how much more so will in the case of the commoner, how much his heart is going to be aroused doubly and ever more so in love of the king, with a connection of the soul in his heart, in his soul, from the very depths of his heart to an infinite, endless extent. And even a person who had a heart of stone, their heart would be turned to water in the case of receiving affection and favor from such an exalted king. And even a person with a heart of stone, their soul would be turned to mayim, to water, with a longing for that king, with the longing of the soul and love of the king. That was the mashal. And now coming to the nimshal, according to all of this, and even more so, according to all of that vision, that image, and even more so, doubly so, infinitely more so, our God has done for us. And here we see how, in the coming section, the Baal HaTanya is really going to evoke for us the giving of the Torah, in which, according to our sages, for all of the assembly of Israel at Sinai, all of the seven heavens, as it were opened up, and everything that Ezekiel saw on his level, those at Sinai saw on a far higher level. Even the lowest of those at Sinai saw on a far higher level. What all that means, I wouldn't like to speculate, but what we are about to hear now is how, particularly when we recreate this vision every morning in our morning blessing prior to the Shema, the first of the two blessings prior to Shema in the morning, Yotzer Or Uvarech Choshek, where we evoke the whole assembly of the angels and the song of the Kedusha, the sanctification of the angels. We are going through this receiving of the Torah every day, and so in that context, let's understand the coming explanation of the Nimshal according to all of the above, and all the more so, our God has done for us in His greatness without any fathoming, and He fills all of the universes. He encompasses all of the universes. And it is known from the Holy Zohar, from the writings of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Ari of blessed memory, the multiplicity of the chambers, the palaces, the worlds, the universes without number. And in every single world and every single chamber and palace there are multitudes upon multitudes of angels without any end and any measurement. As it says in the Talmud, on the verse from Job, is there any number to his legions? And in another place the verse writes, well, there are 1,000 thousands will minister to him, which seems to be a contradiction. That there are tens of thousands all before him. That's in Daniel. So how do we resolve the contradiction? There's no number to his legions, and yet the verse gives a number, answers the Talmud. Well, every single legion may have 1,000,000, 1,000,000 angels, but that's only each single legion. But when it comes to the number of the legions, there is no number. So all of these, think of the infinity of the galaxies, the stars stretching endlessly, and above them all of the workings of this universe on its spiritual level, and they all of these are before the one God like nothing. All of this is like nothing in the face of God in himself. And the Baal HaTanya gives us an image of how nothing is the creation. The image is, if you have a person that says something and the word comes out, in the context of all of the words and all of the thoughts and all of the actions of that person from the year of birth for decades and decades and decades, that single word is absolutely nothing. And so this is the image which Baal HaTanya brings now to express how all of these angels, all of these worlds are nothing before God, and as if they didn't exist, like as nullified as a single word would be in the context of the soul that speaks that word with all of the power of that soul, all the while that the word itself is still in the thought of the soul, or in the will, or in the desire of the heart to say it. It's the word is nothing. It didn't come out. So are all of the worlds before God. So all of the angels are asking, where is the place of his glory? And they answer, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, Melo kol ha'oretz kavodo, filled is all of the earth with his glory. And who are his glory? Who are the true glory? It is the unique nation of priests who take upon themselves the kingship of the one unified God and glorify God by declaring his unity morning and evening and standing in prayer before him in total humility. This is Israel. His glory is the people that obey his commandments. And here God has left behind all of the upper worlds, all of the lower worlds, levels upon levels, Arich Anpin, Atik Yomin, Atzilus, Brio, Yetziro, Asio, and out of everything he only chose Israel, his people. And he took Israel out of Egypt, the very filth of the earth, the iniquity, the open sore of the ervo, the nakedness of the earth, the place of the worst impurity, the worst filth. And he did this not through an angel and not through a messenger, but the Holy One, blessed be he, in his glory, in his very essential self, came down into this lowly place of the creation to which the souls had fallen, as it's written, and I came down to redeem them, to save them, all in order to draw Israel to him with a closeness and a true unity. with the binding of soul, literally, on the level of kissing of mouth to mouth. When an Israelite speaks the word of Hashem, a halakha, at that moment when the words come from the lips of the Israelite, these are words of Torah, the words of God. This is a kissing of God on the lips of the Israelite. Istabkus rucha berucho. When two lovers are kissing and the warm air of love passes between them and joins together, the spirit with the spirit, the breath with the breath is attached, the two become one. That's when the Israelite is aware of the depth, the meaning, the wisdom of this Torah. He comes to a new apprehension of the Torah, a new understanding of God's will, of God's profound wisdom, that it's all one. And also the love between the Israelite and God is with the kisses, with the joining of the Spirit, and now with the hugging, chibuk. That is through the Israelite fulfilling the practical commandments of the 248 limbs of the body, 248 practical commandments corresponding to each limb, be it the commandments of the arm and the hand, giving of charity, binding of the tefillin, the arm on the head, the mitzvahs of the lips and the mouth, of saying Torah and blessings and prayers, of the legs, of running to do mitzvot, and so on and so forth. And now these 248 commandments, these are the 248 limbs of the king, as we've learned earlier in Tanya. So that when we perform them, we're actually putting on we are integrating into ourselves, into our actions, the very limbs of the king. And the commandments are divided into three columns: the right-hand column, the left-hand column, and the center column. Kindness, judgment, and compassion. The two arms and the body. So we have the connection of the head, of the mind, through the level of the kissing, and the connection of spirit and spirit, the connection of body and body through the performance of the commandments. And for that reason, we recite prior to the performance of the commandments, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosov, He has sanctified us with His commandments. Now, the expression here of sanctified us is the same expression as when an Israelite sanctifies a woman to be his wife, completely devoted to him alone, a completely sacred relationship. The lashon of under the chuppah, the chatan, the groom, says to the kala, the bride, Hariat mekudeshet li kedat Moshe Yisrael. Hariat mekudeshet li. Here you are with this ring, mekudeshet, you are sanctified to me, kedat Moshe Yisrael, according to the law of Moses and Israel. So likewise with every commandment that we recite, we are going through the same concept of the sanctification of ourselves. We are receiving the holiness from God as God's bride, God's recipient vessel, completely unique to God. And thus it's written in Genesis that the husband must be joined with his wife, and they must be one flesh. And so it is when we are performing the practical mitzvot, and we are actually coming into this unique union with God through being involved, body and mind and soul, with speech on every level with the mitzvah. We become one flesh with God. And how much more so is the unity of the godly soul of each Israelite when performing when engaged in the study of the Torah, the performance of the commandments, together with the physical soul that is animating the body, that is doing all of this through thoughts, the words that come out into the physical world, and physical actions, all of which are the garments of the soul. And at that moment, all of these, the person, the soul, the body, all of the inner person and the garments of the soul are all bound up in unity with the light of the infinite. Blessed be He. And thus, King Solomon, of blessed memory, throughout his Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, he uses as his running parable throughout the work the unity between Chatan v'Kala, between the groom and the bride, on these levels of attachment, of longing, of yearning, of the embrace and the kisses. And that is why when we say these words prior to each commandment being fulfilled, Asher Kiddushonu b'mitzvosav, He has sanctified us with His commandments. That is to say, He has lifted us up, He has elevated us to the level of Kodesh HaElyon, the supreme holiness. And now Baal HaTanya is going to teach us what is the meaning of holy in the thought of the Torah. What is the supreme holiness of God? That is that the holiness of the one we call the Holy One, blessed be He. We call Him Hashem, we call Him God. In all of His glory, in His essence, this holiness implies in Hebrew the word Kedusha, holiness, or Kadosh, holy, is an expression with the connotation of separation. God is completely separate from all of the world. That is to say, although He is involved, He creates, He oversees every detail, He is animating everything. Nevertheless, in His very essence, God is above and beyond everything. As we said before, all of the worlds, all the creations are like a speck before Him, and we have no idea. He is completely unique, cannot be compared to anything within creation, and for that reason we can only say He is separated, is above and beyond Kadosh. He encompasses all of the world. That is to say, the encompassing levels are those that cannot even be clothed within our world. So now, when a person, through their engaging in the study of the Torah and the practice of the commandments and prayer and devotion, through the unification of the soul, and the soul's being now encompassed within and joined within the light of the Infinite One, blessed be He, the soul now is ascended to the level of the holiness of Ein Sof, of the infinite, blessed be He. Literally, the soul ascends, joining. But at that moment of the study of Torah and the prayer and devotion and performance of the mitzvah, because the soul is completely joined with the Holy One, they are literally all as one together. And this is the meaning of God's call to Israel. We saw it recently in our Torah readings in the portion of Kadoshim Tihiyu. You shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This holiness, that is to say, I've separated you from all of the nations to be mine. That is to say, when you perform all of God's commandments and you are separated to God, to serve God, that is to say, your God who says, I am the Lord your God. The meaning of this is that through the performance of the commandments, I, God, am your God. God comes right into you through the words of Torah that you say, and through the performance of the commandments. God is within you, within your actions, your words, your thoughts, your deeds. And just like we say the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, where this expression is used because our patriarchs made themselves into a merkava, a kind of seat and a chariot upon which the divine spirit rode. They allowed themselves to be vessels to do whatever God wanted them to do, and in this sense they were a merkava. They were the body, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence of the soul, sitting and resting upon them, and they were completely batel, nullified and absorbed in the light of God. So too with every Israelite. He is telling us here, the Baal Tanya, every Israelite, this is the same when we are giving ourselves over to our devotions, our prayers, our studies, and performance of the commandments. We are attached to the infinite. So it is, as he continues to say, with every soul of each Israelite at the time of being engaged in Torah and the commandments. And that's why our sages, our teachers of blessed memory, instructed us and obliged us to in fact stand up in front of anybody who is engaged in the fulfillment of a mitzvah. For example, when the people came to Jerusalem to bring the first fruits, the farmers came up from the country with their produce of fresh grapes and figs and other produce, and they would be accompanied by flutes and singing and joy. The people of Jerusalem would stand up to welcome them, as the Baal Tanya says here, that it is necessary to rise in front of somebody who is engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, because even if that person is an ignorant person, he's not a perfected tzaddik, but just a regular person, you might think nothing special, but he performed is engaged in the mitzvah. That is because you are rising in front of God, who is dwelling within, who is clothed within that person's soul at that moment. Except that the person's soul may not feel this, or may not feel this themselves, or may be engaged in the performance of the commandment, will not realize it. And that's because there is an intervening screen of physicality. Our bodily side, which is just preventing us from being fully aware of how we are attaching ourselves to the infinite light when we are reciting the words of our prayers and performing our commandments, because our bodies are not yet sufficiently purified, and the physicality darkens the eyes of the soul, making them unable to see the visions of God that are flashing before our eyes in the way that the patriarchs were able to see them, that they saw their eternal reward in their very lifetime, already saw such levels. So, just before we go on, let us look at the verse which the Baal Tanya is about to teach us on from Book of Psalms, and this is now from Psalms 73, verse 22, where Asaph, singing this introspective song, is saying, Va'ani va'ar v'la'ida, behemos oyisi imoch. Well, I am but an empty, foolish person. I had no understanding. I was animalistic with you. I was like an animal, I had no idea. And yet, he continues, yet always I'm with you, because you took hold of me. With you took hold of my right arm. I didn't know. I was in the dark, but you were there. I was with you all the time. Continues now in Tanya. Tanya darshaning this verse. This is what Asaph in the Psalm says with Holy Spirit on behalf of all of the assembly of Israel. out in exile as we are today. We all were at Sinai. We all came out of Egypt. And now we're all in exile wherever we are. And Asaph, speaking for all of us, he says, Ba'ar not only has the connotation of complete animalistic ignorance, a totally void person. I had no knowledge. Behemot, that's a plural word of behemah, animals, was I with you? And yet, all the time I'm with you. That is to say, even though I am like an animal, even when I'm with you, and I may not know and I may not feel in my soul this actual union that is going on when I recite words of Torah and prayer and perform the mitzvot. And when I do this, there does not fall upon me the proper awe and reverence and fear first of all, and afterwards the abundant love of the delights or the flaming firebolts. I don't feel any of this. When I do this, it's all like a habit, the way that I wish I could, the way the great tzaddikim, when they have purified their physicality. And as we know, the concept of da'at in this verse in the psalm where he speaks about I didn't know, lo eido, I don't have the da'at. Da'at is the noun from the verb da, know. Da, I don't know, the knowledge. This is not just intellectual knowledge, it is the feeling in the inner parts of the soul, and includes feeling on both sides of the tree of life, the side of kindness and the side of strength, chesed and gevurah. So despite being devoid of this da'at, which I wish I had, even though, says Asaph, I'm always with you, the teaching of Tanya in this chapter, I'm always with you, because even the physicality of the body cannot hold back the union of the soul with the light of Ein Sof, blessed be He, which fills all of the worlds. As it's written in the verse, darkness cannot throw its darkness upon you. God sees everything. So here we see how at the very end of this, the Baal Tanya so beautifully encouraged people like me who may go through an entire prayer service in the morning, afternoon or evening without feeling very much. And yet if we'll keep on going back to that verse in Proverbs, like waters face to face, not only the heart of one person to their fellow, but God's heart to me. He's come down, the King Almighty has come down, and literally I know, took me off the scrap heap. I know where He took me from. And when I will just remind myself of this, particularly on the festival of Shavuot, and morning by morning when reciting the Birkat Torah, first thing in the morning, the blessings over the Torah, or the blessings over the Kriyat Shema, the recital of the Shema, where in the morning the first blessing with the very lengthy depiction of the celestial song of the angels. Now we are hearing how with all those multitudes of angels, God has come right down to you and to me, speaking to us in the language of Bnei Adam, of people, giving us simple, practical pathways to be connected. And this is our freedom at this time when we see slavery engulfing the whole world. The significance of humble Mount Sinai is that it's humility, that it's the humility of the acceptance of the Torah, despite the denial all around us, despite the cancellation all around us, when we accept the Torah as it is, yes, we have questions and we want to know the answers, but when we accept the Torah as it is, then in its performance we are connected with the infinite God day by day.